Welcome to the Building Bite Podcast, a podcast for construction contractors, owners, and insurance professionals, where you can hear from the experts about key topics to help keep you successful. I'm Chris Epps. I'm a senior director with Proactive, and I'm joined here with my co-host, Mike Dierksen, our senior consultant of innovation and content solutions. Our guest today is an educator as well as the AVP of facilities management over at Cal State Sacramento, Justin Reginato. Justin, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Chris. How are you?
Fantastic. I'm doing wonderful. Can't wait to dig in with you here a little bit. Mike, how about yourself? How are you this afternoon?
Doing great, Chris. It's a real treat to have Justin on the show. We were able to connect a little bit before this, and I'm really excited to listen to what he has to say.
Absolutely. Well, we can go ahead and jump in. Today, we're looking to dive into how Justin and Sacramento State are utilizing BIM and construction technology to help drive success, leading to new opportunities for the university. It's great to have you on the show today, Justin. And before we kind of jump into our main topic of building in higher education and current successes and future opportunities, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Oh, again, thanks for having me, Chris and Mike. It's a pleasure to be here. How I landed here is actually pretty random. I started, I knew I was going to be an engineer from an early age. And I would have been a fourth generation miner. So I went to the University of Nevada geological engineering program in the School of Mines because I actually thought that I was going to work underground for a living. My great grandfather was one of the people who figured out how to drill those really deep shafts in South Africa. So he had this kind of history that I thought was really exciting. And I visited a few mining towns. And at the time I was engaged to my now wife. And I was like, I'm not sure that this is a lifestyle that she or I are up to. So I quickly pivoted. I knew I still wanted to work underground. So I went and got a master's degree in geological engineering and went to work for a company called Woodward Clyde, which was bought by URS and then purchased by AECOM later, and worked in the dams and tunnel division. And that company, that office, our Oakland office, had 200 engineers, and almost half of them had PhDs. So it was encouraged, advanced education was encouraged, but it was weird basically on my way out the door to go back to school, one of the supervisors was like, hey, we have a lot of, design engineers, but we don't have anybody in this office that really knows anything about construction. You should go get a PhD in construction management and engineering. And that sort of very haphazard career advice I took. So I went back to get an advanced degree in construction management. And then along the way in getting an advanced degree, I was like, if I'm going to get a PhD in construction, I should probably go work as a project engineer. So I went back to another URS company and was a project engineer / manager / project control specialist on a project as an owner's rep. And that project was the San Francisco Zoo, a $91 million upgrade. So it was just kind of this odd thing. And then at the end of that, I finally graduated, and my wife actually looked at me and said, and I had no intention of going into higher ed, but she said, if you're ever going to do it, try it now. And I applied for a job that was a perfect fit for my background, worked at that institution for 3 years, but really wanted to focus on construction management. So I landed at California State University, Sacramento, and I've been here since 2009. 5 years ago, my predecessor left, took a job at another university, and the university president had success pulling people out of the academic side and putting them in management positions. And because Sac State's construction management program is really well respected, he thought, hey, you can fill in. And at the time, it was like, all right, now I can stop talking about building stuff and actually go build some stuff. The one thing he didn't tell me during my sort of makeshift job interview is that maybe half of what we do is construction management. The other half of it is actually manage the day-to-day operations of the campus. So I was woefully underprepared for that side of it, having responsibility for custodial and grounds and in-house trades. But it's been a really fun ride, and we've done a lot of stuff on campus. We've built a lot of new structures that we are, in facilities management, we're collectively very proud of.
Fantastic. Yeah, and having visited a lot of mines and tunneling projects over my career, I'd like to congratulate you on a career above ground. But certainly a lot of progress there, and certainly happy you found yourself doing something fulfilling, something you enjoy, even if it's not as planned. I can kind of empathize with that career track. I kind of fell into something similar there myself. So And I guess, Sacramento State is a member of the California University system. So maybe if you could tell our listeners a little bit about that, how that works and how you fit into that total framework there relative to your position.
Sure. So California State University Sacramento, or Sac State, is a part of the CSU system, the California State University system. California has two public systems of higher education, actually three if you include community colleges. So I'm a part of the California State system where there's 23 separate campuses. Some of the more famous ones are San Diego State, Fresno State. People, because of their athletic programs have heard of them. And then there's the UC system, which is your Berkeleys, your UCLAs and stuff like that. So they're more research oriented. The CSU system is more about access to higher education. That's why there's so many campuses spread throughout the state. So we're one of 23 campuses, but the system as a whole, the CSU system, 23 campuses, almost 500,000 students, about 50,000 faculty and staff. So it's a pretty big system. The UC system has, I think, 8 campuses, so it's much smaller, but the campuses are larger. Because we're dependent upon state funding, it ebbs and flows, but between the 23 campuses, we have about a $1.5 billion facilities budget annually that gets split up amongst the universities. So it's complicated. And we do have a chancellor's office, which is kind of in the center of it, but they're fairly hands-off with each of the campuses. So each of the campuses operates with a great deal of autonomy. But the system as a whole is, there's a lot of campuses have really big projects going on. So it's fun to be a part of that system and see the change over those 23 campuses.
Yeah, speaking of which, so Justin, I want to kind of take a step back to what you were talking about earlier. You went for an advanced degree. You started working in the industry, found yourself at Sac State, and then, like you said, you kind of got pulled out, and they said, "Okay, well, maybe we'll put you in this role." But you are still teaching. So, was there always a passion for teaching, or what's that like being, back at your alma mater and being an educator, but also working on the staff?
Yeah. So, just to be clear, I actually never attended school at Sac State. My wife did. I went from the University of Nevada to UC Berkeley. I was in the UC system, but when Sacramento is our hometown, so that's part of what was great about coming back here. We lived in the Bay Area for 10 years, and then when our daughters got a little bit older, we were able to come home. But it's been great. So I loved teaching. It wasn't anything that was ever in my career path. And as a matter of fact, the first time I was a graduate student instructor, the feedback was sort of like, you should consider doing something other than teaching. But there's a certain, when you get into a classroom, particularly with students that want to learn, it's intoxicating, particularly because I was teaching construction management, and most people that get degrees in construction management are all in on construction. At that point, you're not sort of dabbling and you're not curious. You're really like, I want to go build stuff. So I like teaching about building stuff, and I like being surrounded by students who like to build stuff. And not only that, our campus, a lot of our students work in internships while they're here. So they're kind of learning by doing, and they're gaining on the job experience. And then they're coming into the classroom. We can kind of talk sort of, here's how we talk about it from a textbook standpoint, but out in the field, you might see it this way. Let's talk about the differences between the two. It's been really, really a fun ride. There's things about I still do teach one class a semester, but some of the classes I gave up to work in facilities, I do miss. I miss the constant interaction with the students.
Excellent. Yeah. I mean, it's clear to see that there's a passion there, right? And I like that you talk about that from a textbook perspective as well as an industry perspective, right? Because as we all know, what you study in the classroom doesn't always 100% translate. That on-the-job learning is a crucial factor there. So speaking of that, now in the facilities management role over at Sac State, can you talk us through that? Like, what are the things that you were implementing that is leading to success over at Sac State?
That's a great question, because we've had a handful of our recent major projects have been very successful, at least in our mind and in our end users' mind. So a lot of what we're focusing on are really sort of the soft skills or the softer side of construction. So the one thing that we do, and we feel that we do really, really well, is collaborative design build. When I started the position, I thought that this was going to be sort of like a typical government agency where everything was design, bid, build, and the builders, the contractors were selected by hard bid. And it's been nothing like that. Everything that we've done, our last 5 or 6 major projects have been collaborative design build. So from that standpoint, what I think that we do really, really well at is bringing on like really good design build teams. We spend a lot of time on the front end vetting teams. And so we have a process that's, there's nothing groundbreaking about it, but we go through an RFQ process and we narrow our list down. And then we go into an RFP process and where we try to have 4 design build teams to select from. And for the most part, I mean, we get to the point where I almost joke that once we get to those final 4, we could put their names in a hat and select one, and we're going to get a good team. So at that point, up to that point, it's really fairly qualitative. We're looking for the right team. Are they asking the right questions? Are they proposing the right team that's going to work with us? And then the final step is they submit their fees and GCs. So we also get a sort of a value component of it. So we're getting the qualitative aspect in terms of getting the really good team, and then there is some price competition on it. So the combination of those two together have enabled us to get really, really good teams and deliver projects on time and on budget.
Yeah, I mean that's incredible. And so one through line we always see on the podcast, it's collaboration, right? It's communication. That's such an important piece of the puzzle. Is there a case study? Is there maybe a specific project in mind? I know you said that you had a couple of recent big successes. What might one of those be?
So we've had several recently. There's 2 that I could give you a quick overview of. In our more sort of recent project is that we had a science building that was going to be half faculty offices and half biology and chemistry labs, so wet labs. And we started that project with the collaborative design build team, and we narrowed it down to a team that just really hit it out of the park. And when we started the RFQ process for that, we were aiming for an 80,000 square foot building. And our construction budget was $54.7 million. So that kind of roughs out to about $671 per square foot. The final product was almost 97,000 square feet for $53.7 million. Sorry. So 97,000 square feet. $53.7 million construction budget, so $556 per square foot. So really, we started with a smaller building and ended up with a much larger building and still saved $1 million. And part of that was through the collaborative design build process. And then another project that we had, and this is where you start to see the innovation come out in the projects is that we had a 1,750 stall parking structure that we were originally going, when we went through the RFP process, most people kind of approach it because all of the parking structures we'd done prior to that were cast in place concrete. And we had a design build team that came in and said, we can do this precast. And it was such a huge deviation. We actually ended up having to run it through the Office of General Counsel down at the Chancellor's office because we hadn't seen a proposal like this. But after figuring out that at the end of it, we were going to get a similar parking structure, it was going to meet all of the specifications we needed, we were able to select that team. They gave us price certainty on the project, but they also delivered it in a 10-month construction duration. And importantly, it was really about 6 months of like crane time where you have trucks coming into campus. So the disruptive construction time, was about 6 months, 10 months total. And we usually start those projects with about a 15-month construction window. So we were able to shrink the duration by 33%. And maintain our budget. So projects like that, this collaboration where we throw out a lot of ideas and prioritize them and work towards that budget and trying to cram as many benefits into the building while still meeting our budget has been sort of, again, we're not on the cutting edge of this, but we're actually seeing it in action. And then looking for solutions like prefab. People have been talking about prefab for years, and for a project of this scale, it's a large parking structure. We had a team that was able to come in and say, yeah, we can do this. And we have a couple other small projects, not smaller projects, but we're expanding our wellness project. And our design build partner on that project is utilizing laser scanning and robots to install drywall. So the teams that we're bringing in are really driving the construction technology on our projects. And that's where we think that we've kind of pushed the curve of construction on our projects.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's every day that people would think of a parking garage as an advancement or something new or sexy, you know. But here you are. You've taken that approach, and like you said, cutting down to 2/3 of the expected time frame with only 6 months of crane time. That's huge, right? And all it is a change in mindset, looking at it from a different perspective and saying, let's be open to new possibilities.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, and that's really what we're looking for is cost certainty and schedule certainty. So when somebody comes into us and says, yeah, we can meet both of those, that's fantastic. But when they can come in and say, hey, we will be less disruptive in terms of schedule, we will get this done faster, so you have fewer headaches, that's even better. And the one thing I want to throw out there, and again, I'm obviously very proud of this, but a parking structure, people would be like, why are you so excited about a parking structure? But this project was so successful that every 2 years, the CSU system, all 23 campuses sort of vote on what was the best project. And we won the award that year. So it's not just your sort of plain vanilla parking structure. Mm-hmm. It's actually well designed. It borders an arboretum and it blends into the trees. And it's got all of the sort of smart parking technology. And then the company that designed it and built it, it also had some structural design elements that were really forward thinking. So it's a heck of a project. And then on the other side, the science building, just, because I want to throw out more bragging points, is that we're not sacrificing, in order to get price certainty and schedule certainty, we're not sacrificing design or other things. It actually, in California, we have Title 24, which sort of governs building performance, and it exceeds. And those are probably the strictest in the country, and we exceed those standards by like 24%. So we're not sort of saying, "Hey, we want this to be cheap and fast at the expense of scope or quality." We're really getting all of those things together. And I kind of learned in construction, you can control cost or schedule, or you can control two of the three things: cost, schedule, or scope. But the third one is out of your hand. And yet we're kind of showing it's like, no, we can control all three of those as long as we follow this process that we've set out and work really collaboratively with our design build partner and our end users. We're able to deliver these really high performing buildings without sacrificing too much of anything.
That's impressive, and I think speaks a lot to the partners that you guys are selecting, and forward thinking on that end. As being involved in higher ed, do you guys ever see the opportunity to involve students in some of those projects as they're developing?
I would love to hire some students to work inside of facilities management. Unfortunately, we can't compete with the wages in the private sector. But I will tell you that being around students is great. But one of the things that really, really puts a smile on my face is when I walk out on a project and see one of my former students out there doing their job that I was a part of helping to train them to do. And almost all of our teams are general contractors that have been working as part of collaborative design build teams. Every project I can think of has either current students working as interns or graduates working as project engineers or project managers. So it's incredibly gratifying to see this sort of life cycle where I might have seen them as a freshman in their entry level class, and then I may have been involved and taught them advanced estimating, and then they're out on a project. And, we're working collaboratively to better their alma mater. It's unreal. You just kind of see, and then you see the whole sort of growth of students from student to practitioner. And it's exciting. It's one of those things where I don't want to overstate it, but I have that sort of same sense of pride that I do when I see when one of my two daughters does something great. It's really cool to see people progressing along their career path and doing it well.
Yeah, it's got to be rewarding when you played at least a small role in that, and perhaps a large role in helping develop those career paths and steering people towards successful careers, and then seeing them come back.
Even if it's a fraction of a percent, I'll take it, because some of these students are so impressive that if I had a hand in that, then fantastic. I'm doing something right.
Yeah, that's awesome. Shifting gears a little bit to considering higher ed maybe separate from commercial building, which is, where we find ourselves operating most of the time. What are some of the nuances building within the construct of higher ed that may be a little bit different from just the standard commercial construction market?
Sure. I don't want to say that we're so different that schedule's more important on education buildings than it is on commercial buildings. But we've had projects that finished like a day before classes started. And if you're done after classes start, then it doesn't matter if it's a day, a month, or a year, it's too late. So most people know when they start on our projects, it's not only do I have to finish on time, but we really have to finish on time. And then the other part of it is unlike other projects where, and on the commercial side, where if you're an owner, a dollar saved on a project is a dollar that you kind of hold back in your pocket. For us, we're not necessarily trying to save money on our projects. We're trying to maximize scope for the budget that we have. So we are allocated money for projects, and we will then work to get as much building as we possibly can for that budget. So in some respects, we definitely want to finish on time, but there's not a whole lot of motivation to come in under budget. And I'm trying to be tactful there because I don't want to make it sound like we just spend money, taxpayer money for the sake of spending it, but really we're building buildings that have a 50, 60 year life cycle. And we want to make sure that we're building them so that they will be productive for that entire life cycle. So we don't want to cheap out on materials that are going to need to be replaced too soon or systems that are energy inefficient. We really painstakingly develop our scope so that not only will the buildings be functional for the life cycle of them, but we're also trying to implement the latest and greatest in terms of pedagogical technology, right? We have smart boards, we have IT systems, particularly now that work for a class that might be half Zoom, half in person. And I think that we've done a really good job of that. We've really kind of jammed these buildings to the gills with all of the latest and greatest technology. And that's part of what we're really excited about doing. In the science building, we also added in some things that at the time, the dean that was overseeing the project, who is the dean of the College of Math and Natural Sciences, was really advocating for some stuff like a retractable roof for telescopes. And part of it is because we teach students that take the astronomy class learn to use old school technologies that require dials and stuff to set. And they really wanted the students to have that experience. And we also built a planetarium, which has become a huge draw for us because not only do our students get to see things under that dome in 3D, but it's attracted elementary schools who come to our campus for field trips. So we're not just building buildings for our students in their 4 years that they're on campus. We're also building facilities to help attract that next generation of college students. And our science building has been an absolute hit in the Sacramento area.
I can imagine. I mean, I'll be visiting if I ever get out there. But
we'll get you inside.
Yeah, there you go. I know a guy now. I know a guy that can help me out with that. But Justin, something you said stuck out to me, that you've mentioned your budget in the past, right? And you, as a state entity. So I'm sure there's a lot of visibility as well. This is taxpayer money, like you said, that is going into this. So how does that change things for you? I mean, there's got to be a certain level of visibility where there's a lot of input coming into that.
Oh, absolutely. So there are checks and balances too. The university has to, in typical big projects, we also have to fund 10% of the project, which usually goes for either design or furniture, fixtures, and equipment. So even if our ambitions get too big, then our sort of copay increases with that. So there's a bit of a check and balance. But what we also do is that you can imagine for faculty and students who are going to inhabit a new building, they want to have a say in it. So on the front end of the project, we actively solicit feedback in many different forms from end users and students. And the end users could be faculty. Certainly they have a say, but it's also the staff that support them. So part of when we hire a design build team, we really dig in to how are you as a team going to do outreach to end users. And they may ask for things that are prohibitively difficult given the budget or the schedule. But how do you tease out that creative process and get all those ideas sort of codified, but then also figuring out, hey, we can't incorporate everything. We do have a budget. So they'll go through and they're really good at working with folks to get their wants and their desires well articulated, and then going through and prioritizing those in terms of needs, wants, great to have sort of things. If we split it up into 3 bins, and there's really 2 bins, what do we need to have a code compliant and safe building? And then there's everything on top of that. And our design build teams have been very successful in doing that. We're very happy with the processes that they've done in terms of soliciting that feedback.
And I can imagine, remembering college, that sometimes that's a can of worms opening up, asking college kids, hey, what do you want to see in this new building? But I'm sure there's also a lot of great insight that maybe they're going to come at you with a perspective that you otherwise weren't thinking. Is there an example of a situation where maybe you learned something from that collaboration that helped you?
Yeah, if you leave it to students, they'll want everything, but they still, at the end of the day, they want to have an affordable college education. So there is a bit of a give and take on that. But the wellness building that we're expanding, this is a building that's 10 years old, and it's so successful that we're expanding it for the first time, and we're already starting to plant the seeds for the next expansion. It's got like a medical office building on one side, and then your sort of really, really cool fitness center on the other side. And when we started that, we invited students and faculty to come and weigh in, and they immediately honed in on locker rooms. And there's a whole host of issues like getting people through them. And then a lot of it was privacy. And I was sitting next to somebody who's roughly my age, and we were like, well, wait, the most efficient showers are like the big open showers where you're sort of incentivized to get in and get out. Nobody wants to hang out in those showers. And the feedback from the students was, we don't want our dads or our grandparents' showers. We want privacy. We want security. And so we went from open showers to a lot more private locker rooms where the lockers are out in the open, but your changing room and your shower is private. And that has been a huge hit. But if you'd left it to somebody like me, I would have just had, that wasn't even on my radar. And I was kind of caught so flat-footed. I went and asked both of my daughters. I was like, hey, is this like kind of normal? And I did kind of describe the showers that I grew up with in high school and college. And both of my daughters, I think they both used the word barbaric. So this was a huge blind spot for folks like me. And if we hadn't asked the questions, we probably would have doubled down on inefficient designs. But now we have locker rooms that our students, like the building is supposed to open up next month, and they're excited for it. They're really excited for it. And it was one of those things that I thought, hey, private restrooms, this is going to be prohibitively expensive. But when you engage a really smart design build team and you listen to your end users and they're prioritizing restrooms, and then we had other priorities, egress and stuff like that, other things that we had to fix. And we kind of say those things are going to boil to the top because we've heard that those are important. We'll make it work. And we've been able to do that.
Yeah, and it's great that, Justin, you guys are implementing that feedback and using kind of those strategies and lessons learned. Maybe if you could expand on that a little bit, just from a broader perspective, what do you think the future looks like for higher ed and in particular Sacramento State and your building program?
So for us, I would say that we are behind the curve, particularly behind the curve of our design build partners in terms of the technology we adopt. So we don't use a whole lot we're agnostic when it comes to construction software. We would prefer that our design build teams kind of pick the suite of software that they want to use. That being said, I think that for us, particularly looking down the road, because we will operate many of the buildings that we build or expand. If we could get to a point where, say, 60 BIM becomes easier to use so that our trades could take that data and know exactly where every air filter is and when it needs to be replaced and what's the life cycle for a water filter and so on and so forth, and have that a menu of spare parts that we can easily pull from. When we get to that point, we will be able to manage all of the square footage on campus with a smaller yet more tech-enabled and smarter workforce. So that's the excitement for us, is that on the one hand, I look at our design build partners and all of the technology they're using, and I'm like, why can't we be doing that in-house? But in some respects, they're on the bleeding edge. Let's let them provide the feedback so that those technologies become more user-friendly. And then at some point, they will hand us the files, and then we can run the building for its 50-year life cycle. So those are the things that I'm really excited about that we haven't adopted yet.
Yeah, and it's awesome that you guys are still able to leverage that technology vis-a-vis your contractors and your design partners, and still get the benefit of that without maybe assuming that responsibility wholesale. So certainly an interesting take.
It is, and I mentioned with both of you in the past, so PlanGrid was developed by Sac State Construction Management graduates. And so they came to us and they're like, no, you don't have to worry about paying for it. We'll give it to you. And some of our design build teams use it and others don't. So while that's something that we can adopt, we just haven't adopted it whole scale. But this is a campus that's not afraid of technology. But given the challenges that we have with our own budget, we're very slow to adopt technology because we want to make sure it's well vetted and that it's going to be supported. Because once we make an investment in any sort of platform, that's a long-term investment for us. So that's part of the reason why we slow play it. And of the 23 campuses, I think we're all kind of in the same boat. There may be some that are slightly more forward thinking than we are, but for the most part, we allow our design build partners to sort of push that leading edge, and then we'll start adopting it a little bit later when it becomes fully vetted.
Good deal. And Justin, I know you're a big listener of the show so far through our first season. And so you won't be surprised that we like to give our audience 3 big takeaways kind of coming out of each podcast episode, keeping in mind that our specific focus and our listeners are mostly related to insurance technology and construction. What do you think those 3 big takeaways would be from our previous conversations and our discussion today?
Yeah. So first and foremost, and we're not looking back on collaborative design build or, sort of integrated building delivery methods, but if you're going to go down that road, be very selective and put the time in on the front end to select the teams that are going to help you meet your mission. And for every project that, the teams are a little bit different. We've had on almost all of our major projects, we've had different combinations of design builders, but we put a lot of effort on the front end on selecting teams. We oftentimes include end users on our selection committees. I mean, and some of these are people that don't know that much about construction, but it's really a fit. And we also recently have included people from the chancellor's office that have elevated our game, and they really dig into RFPs to a deeper level than we have. But we really painstakingly put time on the front end to select the right team for the project that we're pursuing. The second thing we do is we prioritize all of the, as we discussed earlier, all of the stuff that we want in a building. We want to throw it all out onto the table, and we have usually more good ideas than our budget will accommodate. So then we ruthlessly prioritize. We put in the absolute must-haves into the building first, and then we kind of work through all of the stuff that the end users and faculty and staff want, and we rank order it. And they help us with that process. So it's very out on the table. It's very collaborative. And they also understand that, certain things are more important than others, but they're a part of that process. But we build that list and we work our way down it until we're out of money, right? So at the end of it, we've basically, for the budget we have, we've gotten as much scope into that building as possible. And the end users had a say in that organization. And then the last thing we do is, because again, the schedule certainty is table stakes. Buildings have to be delivered on time so that we can occupy them at the beginning of the semester. But on the cost side, we really work to protect our budget at the front end of the project. We allow for ample contingency and we protect that, right? So once we have that prioritized list, we try not to deviate from that, because we know that there's going to be audibles called in the middle of the project. We have authorities having jurisdiction that will even take approved plans and say, well, but we want you to add this, or actually we want to change the design. So we know that we have to accommodate those if we're going to get our certificate of occupancy. So we want to protect that and really manage that budget. But once we get past any potential storm clouds and we know that the project is going to come in on budget, then we open up the contingency and we get even deeper into that list of goodies. And that's oftentimes the big surprising factor, is when faculty and staff said, oh man, I really didn't think we were going to get that far down the list, but here we are. And we've got some of that stuff that we asked for that they thought, even at the time, we were like, hey, this might be a little pie in the sky. But once we're able to report to them that we're going to integrate that into the building, just people are even more amazed by the design build process. They're even happier than they expected. And that's also, when you do a ribbon cutting ceremony and faculty look up at a building they haven't occupied yet, and they already have this overwhelming sense of pride of being able to occupy it. That's really rewarding for us.
Yeah, it's not an under promise, over deliver kind of scenario, but it's certainly, everyone loves good news, right? So it's getting further down that list, it just incentivizes everyone, right? Like you said, it builds a sense of pride, and everyone's really excited to be a part of that. So Justin, then if I am facility manager at a university or an owner, what is something that I could start doing today to start incorporating that process? What's an action item that I can start looking at to start replicating that success?
For us, that's an easy question to answer, Mike. And we like to get feedback. So while we're doing the design process, we reach out to end users. Once we start getting plans on paper, we start circulating those amongst our in-house trades. And we want their feedback because, again, they're the ones that are going to take that finished project and own it for the next, several decades. And so we have in-house electrical. They will usually vet things to make sure that all of our switch gear is properly sized and whatnot. Plumbers will talk about fixtures, and sometimes they'll have feedback like, hey, this type of faucet's harder to maintain than others. And surprisingly, we get really good feedback from our custodial staff. They will come up with questions that nobody anticipated. They'll point out the obvious things like, hey, it'd be really nice if we had a custodial closet on this floor, but they'll ask questions like, are we expected to clean the windows? We had a building that had all of these sort of architecture features on it, and they're like, it's going to be tough to reach with a boom lift or with people coming over the side with bosun's chairs or whatever. And our architect was like, wow, we didn't really think about that. So they went back to the drawing board and thought about that a little bit better. So from a facilities management standpoint, include the operations staff because they'll help uncover some things that if you miss them, they'll just become problems down the road in terms of maintenance, or they'll come up with solutions that'll help you to maximize the effort of the folks that are going to maintain and run that building for the future.
Yeah, excellent advice. And I think we see that over and over again, involving that end user, and the FM and engineering staff is invaluable in delivering a product to a happy end user. So, I think that's consistent across the industry, but a little bit different in your case because you guys remain engaged with them. It's not like you're building a building and then just handing over the keys. So I imagine long-term that helps keep your life a little bit easier too, keeping those guys, giving them a product they're happy with at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And, we've had some feedback. We've had projects where we didn't solicit that feedback. And then our in-house staff are like, why did we do this? They know the problems because they're fixing things. Sure enough, it's like 12 months in one day and the warranty falls off and all of a sudden they're out there replacing it. So it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, you're right. You need to be involved. And on our bigger projects, we certainly do that. Some of the smaller projects that we do with like job order contracting, it's a little bit harder because those projects are really quick. But we want our staff, our facility staff, to have that say because they will usually uncover problems really early and save a lot of headaches.
Yeah. Well, Justin, as we begin to kind of wrap up here, we're going to hit a few speed round questions, if that's all right with you.
All right, shoot away.
All right, the big one. What keeps you up at night from a professional standpoint?
From a professional standpoint, that's easy. We, like the construction industry, are just not filling trade positions at the rate that we need to. And we're seeing retirements, we're seeing resignations, people going other places, and backfilling those positions has been incredibly difficult. And that's part of the reason why we want to have that trade input is if we're managing more and more building space with potentially fewer and fewer people, we need to have our folks be as productive as possible. So but that's what keeps me up at night. To a lesser extent, we are a state institution, so most of our funding comes from tax revenues. And this last year has been really challenging. Tax receipts were down and then they were up. So every year our budget is somewhat fluid, but really it's filling the semi-skilled and the skilled trades that we're really struggling with.
Yeah, as we all are in a lot of ways. I mean, that's a common theme these days, but I could certainly see the nuance and where you guys sit as a higher education system that does build. Filling those positions with competent people is got to be tough. And maybe backing up a little bit to some of our earlier questions and some of your career, how did you grow in your career once you got started into where you are today?
So I was trained as an engineer, and I started my career thinking that if I come up with the most elegant mathematical solution to something, then that was my job. And even being in faculty, it's, I'm kind of responsible for my classroom. And then when I came to facilities, all of a sudden there's 220 people on the team. And so I had to kind of step out of my bubble and start talking to people and be a lot more collaborative myself. So it was really the part that caught me flat-footed was just the amount of that this is a people business. And sitting in your office and working on a spreadsheet is great, but really at the end of the day, we're trying to marshal our team and use their resources effectively. And part of that is me talking with our in-house staff, but also reaching out to faculty and other folks on campus and finding out what are their real challenges. How can we help them? So that's the part where I really kind of had to step out of my comfort zone and become much more extroverted than I had been previously as a college professor.
Justin, you mentioned something about the talent shortage, right, with keeping you up at night. And I can't help but think as an educator, you're in a unique position, right, where you're seeing the future talent and new people coming in and wanting and choosing that space at the university. So what trends are you seeing in that way? And what are you and Sac State doing maybe to offset some of those issues?
Well, it's hard. We're actually, from a perspective of somebody who's a consumer of construction and somebody who's an instructor in a construction management program, I'm in a weird position. So I obviously want as many people to come and get a degree in construction management, preferably at Sac State as possible. But we actually really need a lot more people entering the trades too. So it's on the one hand, I want to encourage people to pursue higher education because that's my business. But on the practitioner side, we need to create an equal sort of career viaduct for people that want to enter the trades. Because at the end of the day, if we're producing a lot of construction managers, but no tradespeople, there's nothing really to manage. So that's kind of the crossroads where we're at. I'm always happy to see that next freshman class show up, but I've also done training for people that work in the trades, and I'm seeing the population decline in terms of practitioners, and it's troubling. So I don't know if I just ducked your question. So we're creating good construction managers, but I'm also working with local groups to figure out your AGCs and industry groups like that. How can we attract people to the trades as well? Not everybody needs to go to college to have a very fulfilling career in construction.
Yeah, absolutely. So Justin, one other question I want to ask you, and this is a shout out to the advanced estimating class at Sacramento State, but what is something that our listeners may be surprised to hear about you today?
Oh, I don't know if anything would surprise them because I'm kind of an open book, and construction management students at Sac State, for whatever reason, really have no problem grilling me and finding me doing knuckleheaded things. So I want to say that they know all of my warts. But the thing that they probably don't know about me is that I'm an amateur beekeeper. So I keep a couple of hives, and it's one of those things I do because it kind of requires concentration. It's kind of a nerdy little habit, but it's something I do to kind of relax. And my wife and I started with my daughter. She got me into it. And now that she's going away to college, it's now my hobby. But we harvest honey every year. We get about 5 pounds of it, and we put it in jars and hand it out to all of our friends.
I think you got a different idea of relaxing than I do, Justin.
Well, I golf too, and all of that kind of stuff. And that's they've seen me golfing before, but there's other than like our sort of close friends, not very many people know that I'm a beekeeper.
Yeah, do you have the full garb, or do you go? Okay, I was gonna say because that would be. I didn't
wear the full garb. I was engaging in beekeeping with another hobby that involves drinking beer, and it didn't go well. So I go full garb.
I can imagine that. That. So Justin, wrapping this up now, this is the Building Bite. That is BIM Insurance Technology with the experts. You are today's expert. We do like to ask our guests, what are you taking a bite out of today? I know you're out there in Sacramento. What's the local fare? What's the number one spot?
Tacos. So it was my wife's birthday yesterday. So we are going to go to her favorite taco place, which is La Vendita in the Oak Park neighborhood of Sacramento. That's that's kind of our date spot. We go there usually at the end of the week. She travels a lot, and then work has been busy for me. So that's where we do our weekly debrief and enjoy some tacos and a Paloma.
Sounds fantastic.
There you go. Yeah, Mike, I think we got our next travel spot. We got to get lined up for lunch.
Absolutely.
Planetariums and tacos. I can offer you that.
That's a win,
Yes.
All right. Well, Justin, we certainly appreciate your time today, and thank you for chatting with us and our audience. If our listeners want to hook up with you, where can they find you?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So if you have my name and search for it, it'll likely come up. I do have apparently a distant cousin with the same name, but you just look for the construction nerd, Justin Reginato, will come up. And then if anybody wants to reach out to me, my sort of personal email that I like to engage in construction talk with is REG at justinreginato.com. And I also have a webpage that's www.justinreginato.com that I usually post pictures of tower cranes and talk about the other stuff that I follow, economic trends and other things that I watch that help me with my planning.
Well, Justin, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. And we'll be in touch next time we're out in Sacramento.
Perfect. Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Building Bite. This podcast has been brought to you by Proactive. Check us out on thebuildingbite.com, where you can subscribe to our newsletter and follow us on social media for all future The Building Bite news and updates. You can also find us on your favorite apps, including Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, and Amazon. If you have ideas for episode topics that we should cover on the show, or you know somebody who would be a perfect guest, let us know at connect@thebuildingbite.com.